What's happening, everyone? Today in the show, I'm joined by Vaibhav Gupta. He is the co-founder and CEO of Boundary. It's an AI startup. We're going to talk about a lot of interesting stuff, so stay tuned. Without further ado, let me introduce Vaibhav Gupta. Thanks a lot for joining the show.
Thanks for having me, Gaurav.
Yeah, let's start with your introduction. Would you mind giving some background to the audience about where you were born and where you were brought up and how you got into computer science?
Yeah, so I was born in India, and about 5 years later, my parents unwillingly or without my consent moved me to America. And from there we lived in Texas and New Jersey and a few other places. But I wish I'd started coding a lot earlier, and I wish I'd gotten computer science earlier. My high school offered some classes, but I never did until about 12th grade. And then a friend, actually over winter break, and I had this wild idea one day, and my friend was like, what if we built it? And that concept just blew my mind. Like, an idea could become a reality, and we did. And I couldn't code, but he could.
Yeah.
So I sat next to him every day, and he coded every day. And over time, he'd give me a feature and say, hey, you can go write this part. And that was really exciting. And a lot of people at that school used that product that we built. And that just got me hooked. Like, there was nothing. That feeling was just amazing to have something from nothing and have real people use it.
Yeah. If you don't mind me asking, what was the product?
We were doing college apps at that time, and our school had a bunch of clubs. So we built a product that could do club apps, where you could apply to being a president or vice president of different clubs. And then, totally a bad idea. I should have built a startup around that, but it was such a thrilling sensation.
Yeah. And then when was this? Do you remember the year or so?
2012 era, 2011, 2012 kind of era.
So then, and that was the 12th grade, and so from there you were like, well, this is exciting. So is that something where definitely in college I'm doing?
No, actually, I'd actually applied to college being an ECE major. I told you, I didn't know how to code until winter break of 12th grade.
Oh, yeah.
So, and then I was like, oh, maybe I should do computer science after that. But that was a decision I made after, not before. I wish I had used it in my college apps, but I didn't have any of this built or anything. So after that, I actually went to university. I added a double major as computer science instead. And then I just coded every single day. I think if I just look back, I tried to code as much as possible, not because I had to. It's just fun. It was the most fun I ever had.
Yeah. What was about coding that was fun to you?
It actually wasn't really about coding. It was about taking ideas and realizing them. So one of the ideas I had back in college was, we all have our college dorms, and I wanted my door to unlock all the time because I hated carrying keys. I hate my pockets having anything in them. Even today, I don't even carry a wallet. I just carry the ID card I need.
That's great.
And that's all I have. I have my phone and one ID card, and that's it. And I lose it all the time, but that's a separate story. But, you want to go, Nico? Go for it.
By the way, this is Nico. It's pretty friendly. Look at that. He already likes him.
That's right. More than me, apparently. But it was really about making something real. And I wanted to build an Arduino system where I could push a lever and open my door as soon as I walk nearby. So you could do that with Bluetooth, small Arduino, a small lever that attached to the door handle. The wiring is a little funky because I couldn't actually drill into the walls, but it kind of worked. And then the code was just a thing you had to do to make this happen.
Gotcha. So it was not about the coding, it was about taking something like an idea and building it into a reality.
Yeah, and then you take that same idea and you quickly are like, oh, then I have to change the batteries every week. That kind of sucks. How do I optimize that? Then you're like, okay, then I want to use less power. How do I use less power? I use Bluetooth low energy. Okay, I have to go learn how to write code for that. And coding became almost the better you could code, the more problems you could solve.
Interesting. Yeah.
And the more problems I wanted to solve, the better I had to become. And it wasn't really it wasn't like I was trying to code. I was just trying to solve problems, and I'm just trying to solve any problem possible. And it turned out a lot of times it was just we didn't have ChatGPT back then.
Yeah.
We barely had Stack Overflow.
Yeah. And YouTube was not that good.
YouTube wasn't that good. It was you just had to figure things out.
Yeah.
I remember so many times I reformatted my computer.
Yeah.
because I was using like Linux.
Yeah.
I didn't really understand it, but all the cool people that I knew were using it, so I was like, I should use this.
Yeah, and I mean, nowadays and in the future also, like kids will, just ask some sort of like an LLM model, and they will get answers personalized. But back then, like if you were working on your problem solving, that's a very specific use case. You can't find anything. You have to figure it out.
You have to figure it out. But there's pros and cons. It's kind of like a calculator. All right. When we learned how to do math, like we could use calculators, and I think it helped us be better at math. And there's different math problems. Like I'm horrible at arithmetic. If you ask me to add or multiply two numbers, I can't do it. My grandpa can. He's great because he learned differently.
Yeah.
But there's different math concepts that I'm better at because I didn't have to. I could spend more time on different things because I didn't have to do it. I think the coders of tomorrow are going to have the same thing.
Yeah, and it's interesting because in a way, life was preparing you for being a founder back then, because you were trying to solve problems, you were trying to start something from scratch, and you had like something that was an itch, like you had to like solve it. And so that's, I guess being a founder or just starting something, right?
I think being a founder is separate. I think being a founder is about making a business, and that's separate than building an idea. And I think a lot of times people like to conflate the two, but I think they're two separate things. Being a founder is mostly sadness. It's mostly sadness. Building an idea is mostly fun.
Yeah.
Because there's different goals. An idea you're building for yourself.
Yeah.
A founder, you're building for your customers.
Yeah.
You're building for like the world or a problem. Like there's something real. An idea is for you.
Yeah.
And the goals and the way they manifest and the pressure you feel is very different.
Yeah. And I want to touch more on that. Maybe we can discuss this a little later. But let's talk about, so you were doing the double major degree, and then you graduated, and which university was this?
This was University of Texas at Austin. My co-founder actually went there too. UTS.
Oh, like that?
Yeah.
But did you guys knew each other? But
No, we actually met a year after we both graduated, or a couple months afterwards. Yeah.
That's interesting. And so from there, what was the next journey?
So while I was in university, I interned at a few places, and that got me even more hooked into computer science. I interned over on like the ads team over on eBay, or the recommendation engine team over at eBay. That was a startup that got bought out. And like one vivid memory I have is I love ping pong. I used to play on my university's ping pong team. It's super fun. I showed up to that company that had recently been acquired by eBay, and I told them I love ping pong. And I remember the guy that ran that office, me and him walked out to the Sports Authority down the street, and we just rolled the ping pong table into the office.
What?
And like, you can imagine me, 19, 18-year-old, like back in 2012, the salaries weren't what they were today anymore. Like they were a lot smaller, and like, my mind was just blown. I was in New York, first of all. They gave us an amazing housing. I went there and like, all of a sudden I was like, oh my God. Like, it's all I get to solve problems all day, and like this is like the life that there is. And turned out it's a little bit more nuanced than that.
Yeah.
But it really was fun. And then from there, I went and interned at Facebook the next year. I actually interviewed at YC while I was in college, and we got rejected.
Yeah. What was the idea that you applied for?
We're building a non-invasive glucose monitor. So for like diabetics.
Yeah.
And I was not qualified. Thank goodness we didn't get in.
Yeah.
I don't think I was ready to be a founder back then.
Yeah.
But we went from there. I ended up working at Microsoft for some years after that.
And what was the Microsoft project that you were working in?
I joined the HoloLens team back then, and that was, I think, the first time that I was truly humbled. I think when you write a lot of code, sometimes at college, what you do is you only see the people around you. And when you enter like the real world, for the first time, you meet people that are just like amazing, and years, like, it's like I cook. My mom is an amazing cook. She can spend she has decades of experience of cooking over me. But like, when I cook, sometimes I think I'm good, but when I eat her food, I remember I'm not nearly as good as I think I am. And the same thing happened with coding. When I was coding, I used to think I was really good because I was writing all this code. I was shipping products, people were using them. Not too many, but a few people were using them back in college. And I was doing well in classes. It made me feel good about myself, and I used to think I was really good. But I joined HoloLens, and then I met the guy that wrote the physics engine for FIFA.
What?
And that, like, he was my boss at the time. He was my hiring manager. It was wild. Like, I was like, yeah, I don't compare. Like I have so much further to go. And I met people that could just think so much more clearly about a piece of software and they knew what the code should look like the moment their idea formed in their head.
Yeah.
And I wasn't there. And it was like one of the best experiences for me to just learn from all of these folks. And I'm still friends with a lot of them now.
Yeah. So let's talk about your manager and who wrote the software engine for FIFA. What was one or two things specifically like he learned from him that is still with you?
I wouldn't even say him specifically. It was like everyone on the team was so amazing. And I know, like,
it's like so many smart people around it. It is like you get like humbled at the same time. You're like,
yeah,
I need to learn so much more. Right?
Exactly. Like I think when I was an intern, it was different. I think an intern and a full-time person have a different relationship than being a full-time junior person on the team.
Gotcha.
And I was by far the youngest person on that team. I think the next youngest person to me, who was my like onboarding manager, and now one of my best friends.
Yeah.
He was like 4 or 5 years older than me.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think there's a saying, and I think it might be by Warren Buffett. He says that you always want to surround yourself with the smartest people in the room. And if you are the smartest, then you need to change the room. Or if you are the dumbest, then you have to be in the room. I mean, something around those lines. And that's something, that's live actually what you faced over there.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I really took away was like, I remember my first code review I ever made into the team. First of all, they gave me some dumb thing to do, which is just moving data from this side of software to the other side of the software, from the very core all the way out. And I was like, why am I doing this? This feels dumb. But in reality, and I think a lot of junior devs feel this way about that kind of work, but in reality, that was actually the best thing they could have done. Because I learned every single part of the pipeline by having to move data from all the way from the bottom all the way to the top to where our consumer or our customers consume the data. Yeah. And that educational experience is wild. And then I think it was like a 80, I don't forget the exact line, like 50 or 60 line code review, which is not much. But I got 80 comments, like 83 comments on that code review. And I just remember like how I felt after that. I felt like I was a loser. Like nothing I did mattered because I was like, oh my God, all these people are so smart. They left me more comments and lines of code that I wrote. But I think I talked to someone on that and they were just like, it's okay, just fix it and then learn and you'll just get better. And that approach of the feedback you get is not bad and your code is not something that you attach to your personal skill set, like personal ego or anything about it, was the biggest thing. It took a while to not attach how I feel about how people judge my code.
Right. Yeah, because there's gonna be flaws and there's gonna be
and people know better. Like that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Like that's why you're on that team, so you can like learn from other folks, not from yourself.
Yeah.
And that was like a totally different mindset shift that I think wasn't. It just doesn't exist in the college environment because you work so much solo and mostly with peers.
Yeah, and it's a smaller bubble, and you when you actually in the almost in a job environment, and then you actually face with the real like people who are from everywhere, all over the world. That's awesome. So now let's talk about your next journey. What was the next adventure for you?
So I actually quit my Microsoft job, and that was scary. I've been building startups or ideas, I should say, not startups, but ideas for a lot of college. And then when I started Microsoft, I still ran some ideas in the background at all times. I love my job. I should definitely preface. It wasn't because my job was boring. It wasn't because I was learning. I'm just kind of an addict and I just need to do ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And about 3 years later, I'd done the Microsoft thing. I'd done it as a software engineer and I eventually became a PA product manager as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then I decided to just start something. So that was a coding bootcamp that I started, and that's because I'm just really passionate about education.
Yeah, and that's Life Plus Plus.
That was Life Plus Plus.
What a cool name, man.
We ran a coding bootcamp where I decided that instead of teaching people JavaScript or Python, we're going to teach them C++. So hence why Life Plus Plus, because C++ and just around it. And it was, I think it's really rewarding. And the people that went through it, they'd end up getting jobs. Some of them work at Microsoft now, some of them work at other startups. And they're really, really incredible folks. But one thing I learned is EdTech is not a space for me. It's a very different dynamic to be really passionate about helping others learn something and then also trying to make money off of it at the same time. It's not the same as just helping someone. So now if I can, I volunteer instead.
Yeah.
And that just feels way better. We don't have to mix any financial element of it or like worry about growing the business or any trade-offs there at all.
Yeah. No, that makes total sense, because that way you're not having any other thought of it. You're just sharing it for the sake of sharing.
Exactly.
Teaching it for the sake of like just let you mentor, right?
And that's the reason I started anyway. And like the money was just a way to make the business work and allow me to do that because I do have to pay bills.
Yeah.
But it's better to have a main job and then just help on the side rather than make helping the full-time job.
Yeah. And you did that for 1 year or so.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
And then what was the next adventure from there?
After that, one of my colleagues over at Google, over at Microsoft, had moved to Google at that time, and there was an opening on his team, so we ended up joining that group for a while.
And what was that thing?
That was the augmented reality group over at Google.
The AR core?
AR core team. So if you're on your phone, you're doing AR stuff on Android phones, we help build part of that.
Is Google Lens part of that?
Google Lens was a sister team that we worked with actually pretty closely, but we worked specifically on like a lot of like 3D reconstruction, a lot of hologram stuff that was going on when Snapchat did stuff. We kind of empowered all that stuff.
Interesting. Yeah, and so how long were you there for, and what was like 1 or 2 things you learned about working at Google?
That was about 2 years, and this was different because this time I went into Google not as an entry-level engineer, as a mid-level engineer, and I kind of had a little bit more say going into it. Things I learned: Google is very different than Microsoft. Google's build systems are beautiful. Like their code is just like, when you write code in Google, it almost feels like you're not coding, you're just thinking and the code is just happening and the system just works. I think every developer hates tooling that gets in the way of that. Like, you don't want to write code and then spend half the time figuring out how the Git merge did it, how your code doesn't align with the other code your other team members are shipping, or why unit tests are failing, and like, what is that command to run this test again? You don't have to think about any of that stuff. Google does all that. If you don't understand a piece of code, you can just search it and it works. It tells you what that piece of code did. And this was before ChatGPT or any of this stuff.
What?
It was just...
Was this like open source too, or was it?
No, this is internally in Google. Like, one huge problem with large code bases is how long it takes to write code. Because part of writing code is you have to write the code, then you have to build the code into a thing that can actually be run. Because code is just like a raw docx file, a raw file.
And you're talking about the integration, right?
I'm talking about like the compilation step.
Okay.
And Google just did that so well. Like, it was just... At Microsoft, I remember there were days when I walked in and I would be there and like, we would just have to rebuild the whole system, and that would take 3 hours. And I would just go home for the day because there was nothing I could do.
Yeah.
And other parts of Microsoft are amazing too. Like, I love the team culture, I love the project. And we as a team on HoloLens were really effective. But at Google, it just weren't. And I felt like I could spend all of my time coding. And we'll talk about developer experience later, but that really set the bar for what I thought how all developers in the world should code. It was just like, you just code, you don't worry about anything else.
Interesting. Let's actually talk about that, and if you can expand on like that learning and how right now the development community is coding and what they should be, what should be the ideal scenario for them.
I think it's more about just like, how do things get in your way? So let's say you change 5 lines of code in a really, really big code base, and the code base has 50,000 tests. Which of the tests should you run if you only change 5 lines of code? If you run all 50,000 tests, you now have to wait like a couple hours. And that's just not very good.
And not productive.
If you rely on people to individually know what tests to run, then imagine someone that just joined your team for the first time recently this week, and they forget to run one of these tests. And now your customers could be impacted by a breakage. That's not very good either. So like the idea that you could just know that if certain lines of code change, that you could predict which tests you have to run, is something that Google did. Small things just like how easy it was to load a code base up on any computer anywhere was great. You never have to worry about like, is this code base too big for my machine or anything? It just kind of solved that problem for you.
Yeah. So actually, and I want to touch now on because of you mentioned about the coding, and I want to talk about the future of coding and talk about the AI.
Yeah.
I want to touch on you were at the time working at the DE Shaw when ChatGPT came out, right?
No, I'd actually quit by then.
Oh, you won. Good.
So after Google, I joined D. Shaw,
Right.
and that was a really fun experience. Honestly, it's probably, as much as I loved Microsoft and Google, D. Shaw is my favorite place to work. Some of the smartest people I've ever worked with, some of the most humble people I've ever worked with. Not to say anyone before wasn't humble, but definitely just like a great collaborative environment. I remember one thing that someone said was like, hey, here's how the culture here works. If you have an idea, and that idea leads me to having a different idea, then I'll cite you wherever I write my idea down, being like, this idea was inspired by Gaurav. That's just such a beautiful culture.
Yeah.
It's just like so, it feels good to know that it's not about getting promoted, it's not about anything else, it's about truly trying to win together. And that was just an amazing feeling.
It almost feels like you're recognized, and it's kind of like very humane trade of us, right?
It makes you want to work with other people.
Yeah.
Is the big thing, and I loved it there. And I think the day I realized I was going to leave was a very sad day.
Sad day.
Yeah, a lot of personal stuff in my life at that point, but like at some point I was just like, I have to. It was like, it's now or never. I should leave.
And let's talk about that. So you said now or never. What was the circumstances?
That was I think I was like 27 at that time. I had done pretty well for myself in my career, and at least in my perspective, I was pretty happy with where I was. I think if I talked to my high school self back then, he would have been shocked, and like more than happy. And at some point, I was like, I can kind of see where my life is going and what it's going to go to, and I just wanted to see what different would look like. It had nothing to do with anything. It was just like, I just wanted to see what different would feel like.
Yeah.
And like, just due to personal reasons at that time, I just needed something different. And like, that was it.
Yeah. And do you remember, and this was like sometime in 2022?
I think so.
Yeah.
Timelines are weird. I think so, yeah.
You can. So let's actually dive into, we got a big news, November 2022, that ChatGPT comes out, and then everything changes from there. What was your thinking at that time, and how did it shape for you to start like Boundary at that? Because I think you
So
started
Boundary
like,
didn't start back then.
Okay.
I had gotten into Y Combinator around then. I'd gotten into Y Combinator right before ChatGPT came out.
And what was that related to? Some sort of like machine learning?
Nope, not at all. We were actually building a Slack competitor.
Oh, interesting.
Why was I building a Slack competitor? To be honest, like I have no UI background. I mostly wrote assembly code for my whole career, so like really low-level code. Never wrote a website. But the one thing I always valued was almost at every place I've worked at, I've walked away with friends that I've known for years. And I love the connection that I've made. It really adds a lot of value to my life. And I just felt sad that people didn't have that in their life. And me and my co-founder just set out to solve that problem.
Heck yeah, man. That's a way to solve problems.
Yeah. So we applied to YC with that. And when we applied to YC, I remember in the interview, they told us, this is a horrible idea. Please pivot.
Yeah. But then why did they, because even if you were selected for interview, they saw something in you, like what did they share something about, like, we want to invest in you, but at the same time, you change ideas.
I've applied to YC 4 times now.
Yeah.
I've gotten in interviews 3 times, and one of those times I was let in. And I think this is like one advice I always give to everyone, which is just like apply to jobs every year. Don't just apply when you're unhappy with your job.
Interesting.
And I've done that every year. I applied to jobs, and most years I did take a job change because I love my job. Yeah. I love my team. I love the problem, and any job that came around really had to be in a really, really high bar.
Yeah,
to justify it.
Yeah.
Because I love my job.
Yeah.
I've loved every job I've had.
Yeah.
So when it came to like applying to YC, I think one thing that probably the only reason we got in is I loved working with my co-founder.
Yeah.
And my co-founder loved working with me. And that was a big part of it.
Yeah.
We just liked working together.
I think in one of the FAQs, they do mention that they invest more into people and the co-founder team and your chemistry between the two? Because ideas can come and go, right? The connection and the joy that you get from working with each other, the same way that you got and the D-Shaw company, right? So that stays.
Yeah, I think Aaron and I have explored over 12 pivots
Wow.
together.
Yeah.
And by explore, I mean spend a couple weeks on them, at least. Some like months.
Yeah. So actually, let's touch on that. And that was you actually they provided you like funding, and you said that you have to pivot. So what was the next move from there?
Well, we didn't actually pivot.
You did.
We told them no. They still let us in.
Mm-hmm.
And ChatGPT came out after that.
Yeah.
We still didn't pivot.
Yeah.
But sometime in the batch, halfway through, I think we just realized that the Slack thing wasn't working. And that was probably one of the saddest days in our life. I remember crying that night. We were both so sad because we were so attached to it.
Yeah.
It was like, it wasn't just about letting go of the idea. It was letting go of this idea of making the world a better place in our mind of where people would be friends with their colleagues and therefore like humans more.
Yeah.
And like pivoting that, like stepping away from that goal.
Clearly.
But in some sense, one really key piece of advice I asked someone, it's like they asked us what is our differentiator in this product. And I remember saying like, we really care. And I remember them asking us back again, like, your differentiator is that you care a lot. And that's just not a differentiator. Like, as you can care about a problem so much that doesn't make you the right person to solve it, or even a problem that a lot of people want solved. And if you want to build a big business, you have to think about that. Not only is the problem worth solving, but are you the right people that can solve it in some way?
Yeah. So what was the pivot, and what did you change finally to?
That's when we started breaking out into we have a couple ideas that we explored, but eventually we kind of broke out into machine learning infrastructure. So like my background is algorithm design. My co-founder's background is high-scale distributed systems. He worked at Amazon for like 10 years, and like he worked on EC2, like the core thing that backs like Netflix and all these other systems.
Yes.
He worked on watch parties and like other real-time systems for Amazon Prime. And it just made sense. We both love developers. We love making developers happy. Going back to that Google thing about just like, if you build tooling that gets out of the developer's way, developers can do what they do best, which is make their customers happy.
Yeah.
And we want to make that tooling. That's like, I could spend hours talking to any engineer about just topics. I love it. It's just fun.
Yeah.
So like this idea of making developers happy is just, it's like the best thing I could ever do. I love it every single day.
Yeah, because you've been in their scenario and you understand them. It's almost like you know their perspective and you know your perspective. So
I'm just trying to make myself happy in some ways, and like that's just the best customer I can build for, like someone like me.
Yeah, and so a lot of people listening, are either applying to Y Combinators or just are curious, like how does the process go? So I want to ask you, what was your experience, being at Y Combinator, and how did they help you in the journey?
I would say, like any other investor, you should not rely on your company's success based on any investor. If you do, the investor doesn't want you already. Because your company should succeed despite the odds. So I think like asking like, how can Y Combinator help you? Like, yeah, I mean, it does help. The brand of Y Combinator like helps put you on the website, but all it does is get you to the door. Just like a reference can only get you to the interview. They cannot get you the job. You have to get the job yourself. And I think the best help Y Combinator is not actually Y Combinator itself, but actually the Y Combinator community. All the other founders that I've gotten to know, learn from, talk to, like. The reason we pivoted isn't just because we had this realization. We called the YC founder in that space and we asked him his honest opinion and how his business was doing, and he was so honest with us. And like that just doesn't happen too many other places. Like the fact that I can just call a random founder, they'll take my call and they'll be honest with me without really knowing me at all and without having any further conversations with me.
Yeah.
That's the best part about Y Combinator. The friends you make, the people you learn from.
I see. Then the environment, basically.
Yeah, and I don't mean just like the batchmates. The batchmates are awesome. We have these two friends, Ian and Jason, who are in our batch, And we lived with them during the batch, and we're awesome friends. It was so much fun. I have memories from that place when we lived together. That'll never be taken away.
Yeah.
But just everyone outside the batch, people before you, people that come after you, you just connect with people, and that's amazing.
Yeah, and I think each of us want a place where we feel like we belong. You know, it's like a community.
Yeah.
And so it's good that Y Combinator have created that. So I know earlier we touched about a lot of things about founder is not all glorified. And so let's touch base on that. What are some of the challenges and sacrifices that you have to make being a founder and CEO of startups?
I wouldn't even use the word CEO. Our company's small. We have like 7 people.
Yeah.
And we all work a lot. But I'll tell you about the beginning days of what me and my Aaron went through when we were first building. So for context for everyone else, what we do is we build BAML. And our, over at Boundary, BAML, it was this decision to make a brand new programming language. So kind of like Python and Java and C++, BAML. That was the idea. And like the sacrifices you have to make when you decide to go do something like this is a few. One is compensation. You're just not making money. I remember like me and Aaron not making any money for so long. We made $0. And even this year, we were finally paying ourselves for the first time in like the last 3 years or so or something. That sucks. Like,
Yeah.
it sucks not making money, especially when you feel like as a software engineer, you could make money. Like in this AI age, I know people talk about layoffs and those are really unfortunate, but senior engineers are still paid a lot, staff engineers are still paid a lot, and like the opportunity cost to go pursue a startup is immense. The impact is something people often talk about. They're like, I can have a huge impact if I work in a startup. I think the better way to put it is you have a tiny chance at making a large impact. But reality, you will have no impact. No one will use your thing ever. You have a better chance of having impact by working at Google than you do here. Like, I think there's some founder at YC that said this before, and I don't remember who. I wish I could cite them. But they said, you make less money, you have less impact, you have less control, right? And like you have less authority, you have less everything.
Thank you.
You have less people under you. Like everything is just less at a startup, and there's really no upside. The only upside is that you want to do it.
Yeah. See, that's what my curiosity is. What keeps you going? Like, what keeps these startup founders going?
I think you just have to really care about what you're doing. Like me and Aaron love making developers happy, and like this idea that like when we first started, we had no one using BAML. Literally 0 people, because of course it's a new programming language. Who would be insane enough to use a new programming language made by 2 randos on the internet? Yeah. No one. We couldn't even get our friends to use it. And now we have hundreds of people using us every week. And like, what keeps us going is just like every single time I meet someone that has seen BAML or used BAML, it just like it like warms my heart. I don't know how it's going. It just looks so happy.
Yeah.
I feel so excited. When a user complains about a bug that we have, I love that. You know why? Because that means they need this, and it's like it's this obsession around like just wanting to make people like developers happy.
Yeah, and I think we were earlier talking about like this is what you call impact, right? You are actually changing people's life. That's more meaningful. That's something you can actually, wake up in the morning and all right, I'm gonna make people's life better by helping them, code faster, for example.
Yeah, one thing that really shocked me was like, so for more context, our programming language is specifically about how do you use machine learning models like LLMs in a way that allows them to be a lot more stable and reliable. Because we all have seen ChatGPT, but ChatGPT makes up things. ChatGPT doesn't say the same thing back to you 10 times over if you ask the same question. Yeah. It changes it up. Mm-hmm. But if I want to use ChatGPT in my app, not as like a website or a chat app, but I mean like to power some background process, like processing a resume and putting it into a database. I need it to work the same thing over and over. I need to work the same way over and over again. And that's the problem that we solve.
Interesting. Can you give a few more examples? Because I'm thinking of, like Cursor also. I mean, maybe it might be different, but like, you have V0 Bolt.new. How is that different than, because they are also the same algorithms, right?
So they're a totally different way to think about it. I think what Cursor and Bolt and V0 do is they make it easier for you to write code. What they do is they say, hey, you want to make a website? You can describe your website in English and we will write all the code for you. What we do is we're actually solving a different problem. And Cursor, you can use us with Cursor, with Bolt, or some other features. But it's more about like, if you're trying to use a model in your code base, you work in construction, right? So I'm sure you get tons of PDFs.
Yeah.
If you want to take, and I'm sure you have a database, we'll give you an example of something that you have, a type of file you might look at or something.
Yeah, so we do like a lot of like method of procedures, which are like Excel documents, but we have a lot of those because we have to submit to the client every single time we do work. So that's a lot of database of, we're talking 200 Excel files in just a few months.
Cool. So you have 200 Excel files, each with different columns, each which have different meaning, and sometimes I bet they have mistakes.
All the time.
So if you want to write software that can catch those mistakes using an LLM, you need to trust that. You need to know that, hey, these two numbers, if I ask the LLM to do something with them, it did something reasonable with them. Like let's say you added 2 bill of materials and all of a sudden you got a negative. You don't want that to happen.
Yeah.
But it could with an LLM. You can't really trust it. We add a layer of trust on top of that for developers.
That's so critical because I'm hearing that these LLM models are non-deterministic, and so having that deterministic gives reliability and trust to the people who are actually using it every single day. Okay, so let's talk about the. So you talk about it's basically based off of creating more reliability in these large language models. Are you actually writing your code, or are you writing this language from the start, or are you using a base model?
Oh, we made it from scratch.
Yeah.
Completely from scratch. And you can use us with OpenAI, you can use us with Anthropic, you can use us with Google's models, Amazon just released Nova, you can use us with that. You can kind of use us with anything, and we just think of us like, you know in Mario Kart how you get a little boost?
Yeah.
With a mushroom?
Yeah.
We're like a little boost on every model that you can just use without modifying, no fine tuning, that just makes every model a little bit better.
So is it like an API sort of?
Nope, it's even easier. It runs on your own machines. You never have to hit our servers. It's completely open source. What that means for those that may not know is just like, we make the source code completely available to you. So in case, hope that I don't see this happening, but if we do ever go out of business, you just still can use it and like rely on it.
Man, I love that. So let me ask this: how do you measure that the model is giving more reliable results using your product?
There's actually a lot of standard benchmarks, and we just run those benchmarks, and we've shown like multiple times now that. So GPT, I'm not sure if everyone knows, but GPT 3.5 was the first model that got released in November.
Yep.
GPT 3.5 with BAML is actually better than GPT 4.0 without BAML.
Wow.
On those benchmarks.
Yeah.
And these are standard benchmarks made by Berkeley.
Yeah.
And like we just beat them.
So I can imagine now that OpenAI has released O1.
We make O1 better. Exactly.
Yeah, I can see a huge benefit in that.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming this can apply to pretty much any industry.
Yeah, so we have people in like the finance industry using us, manufacturing, marketing, financial industry, from like banking, healthcare, kind of we have, like I said, hundreds of teams using us now.
Yeah.
And it's all over.
Yeah, I know you have to go, but I have like a few more questions, and I'm pretty sure audience are curious too. Where do you see the future of coding going, or software engineering going? Because I'm seeing a lot less and less work that software engineers have to put in to produce more output.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. A lot of people, I see a lot of people have opinions on this. I'll share my 2 cents. Think back to the days of like 1990s. When people used to write code back then, Python didn't really exist.
Yeah.
And when people said, hey, we have this thing called Python that can make your code easier to read for English, but it's not C++, which was the dominant language back then, C++, Java and such. It was kind of scary. People are like, oh, is this gonna let anyone code? What is this gonna do to coding? And all that happened when we made Python and JavaScript and all these other easier languages, I would say, not in a bad way. It's good that they're easier. They offload problems that people don't have to. We have more code than ever before, right? More code, more websites, more apps. Then around like the 2011 era, what happened was we had what to call it? React came out,
Yeah.
which Facebook made. And people in the beginning are like, this React thing is okay.
Yeah.
But it turned out we have more websites than ever before because of React came out.
That's so true.
Think about Apple. Apple's original language for their app developers is Objective-C. And then eventually they're like, hey, this Objective-C thing is not it. Let's use Swift. And they made a new language.
Yeah.
And again, in the beginning, people were like, nah, Swift, let's just use Objective-C. But Swift was easier and had better tooling. And we have more apps than ever before.
Yeah. So what you are saying is that it's only gonna help create more and more coding. It's gonna make it easier, but it's gonna help more and more coding. How about like?
And think about how many more people know how to code now because Python and JavaScript exist, and not just C++.
That's true.
It's like ever in the world didn't learn how to code.
Yeah.
But some people did, and they only know Python. They make society a lot better.
Exactly. I started Python like 2021, and I was like, man, coding is easy and fun. And I was like, man, everybody should get into it. But now with the prompt engineering, I guess you don't even have to code as much, or like using cursor.
Well, you get different levels of reliability. If you write less code, it's like security.
Yeah.
If you write software as a Python developer, the amount of security you have is based on how much code you write. You don't just get security for free with no lines of code. Eventually, I think we will. But today we don't. We have to write more code.
Man, that's awesome. I am super excited that more and more people use BAML, and this gets more and more mainframe. I have two more questions for you. First is, now that you have been in the AI and machine learning and algorithm industry for so long, where do you see this going in the next year or coming 2 to 3 years?
I think it's going to be a paradigm shift for so many people. Most developers, like for example, you've been doing a lot of Python. Python code kind of is very deterministic. You write an if statement, it'll do that thing every single time. Now, when you use a model, it doesn't do the same thing every single time. It's like 95% of the time it'll do this thing, and 5% of the time it'll do the wrong thing. That's just a different way of thinking. And I think more people are going to have to adapt to that way. And we have two choices. People can just learn all the fundamentals from scratch. Kind of like C++ is what I call the fundamentals of if conditions. You can learn all that from scratch, or you can learn Python and not worry about everything.
Interesting.
And it made Python, you're still an effective developer even though you don't know everything about C++. That's okay. And I think our perspective is that rather than everyone having to learn everything about machine learning from scratch, BAML can expose some of these abstraction layers, kind of like Python does for software engineering. BAML can do that for AI ML, and expose the layers that you need, expose the control that you need, without having you learn every little nitty-gritty detail about, hey, this is the best way to make OpenAI reliable. This is the best way to make Anthropic reliable. And you don't have to think about everything.
So what I'm hearing from you is that in the coming year, you'll have these LLM models still prevalent, but at the same time, the question will be, how can you make these reliable? And there will be a lot of observability factor to it, and how can you measure it and make sure that these are giving more and more accurate results and more deterministic results?
Observability is one part of it, but I think the way I always think about it is you also need people need to build this muscle. Think about design. When someone makes a website for the first time and you say, I have this idea, I want to add a feature for picking what city you want the weather for. A really good designer, without even thinking, instinctively knows what the right UX for that kind of problem is. They're already like, okay, we need a map, we need this. A more novice designer might just say, we need an entry box where someone can add in the city name. A better designer might say, we need an entry box where it auto-completes a city as you go type into it. The map is auto-updating as we go write this, and it's just intuitive. So it's more about the iteration loop that you have, and observability is one part of it, but a large part is definitely going to be the iteration loop that people have. And that muscle is just something people need. It's not just about being able to know that these tools exist. It's really about knowing, how do these tools fit into your workflow as a developer?
Interesting.
Because we can have the best observability in the world, but if it takes me forever to change my code and understand what my code is doing, it doesn't matter.
What are you, apart from BAML, because I mean, you have got me very excited about BAML, but apart from BAML, what is one other AI tool that you're most excited about going into 2025?
Probably the best one I'm really, really keen on is just like the general search capabilities on the internet. I think the way we ask questions are going to be dramatically different. And like, I already see this in a few places, but like, I want great search at GitHub. GitHub search is so bad. And I can't wait till they make it better. I want, Google search has clearly got better. ChatGPT is a search engine half the time. But I think the expectation for the customer, not just me, but everyone, is going to go really high on like, how easy is it to find information?
Yeah. Okay, well, that actually brings me to my last question. What advice would you give to the people who are, wanted to pursue like being a startup founder or just be in the artificial intelligence, industry? How do they navigate this? Because there's so much information out there. There's so many people talking about use this, use that. Like, how do you navigate this?
Yeah, so I think I'll talk to the people that want to get into AI first. It has never been easier to get into AI. Just think of a use case, and it could be something very simple. Maybe you're a student and you're like, hey, I want to figure out I want to take my schedule and compare it with a friend and have it recommend classes to me. I don't know how to go solve that problem, but just go figure it out. Like, go start writing some code, use OpenAI, use Anthropic, and just try. And I think as you try, you'll build this muscle for what it is. Maybe you work in construction and you have a bunch of Excel sheets, and you're like, hey, I'm doing this manual work all the time. Ask yourself, if I had to write some Python code that could go automate this process, could I go do that? And then where can I send an LLM to go automate some of these manual checks that I'm doing? And then that'll do two things. One, I'll get you familiar with how to go use them. But two, it'll help you build that muscle. We were talking about how a really good designer is just based on how many things they've designed and how getting better eventually gives you this intuition. The more times you write prompts for different problems, the better you'll be. So just go do that more. To everyone that wants to be a founder, I would say don't be a founder. It's horrible. Like I said, you make less money, you have less power, you have less everything. You will have less impact. No one cares about what you're building. You're just sad all the time. You're working. I work 6 a.m. to like 9 p.m. most days. I work weekends. It sucks. Like, it's not worth it. And if me saying this is really convincing you should do it, you should definitely not do it.
Yeah.
But if you want to do it despite all that, because you just have to do it, you have that feeling, then just start today if you can.
Yeah, so it's about like that itch, right? We all have that we want to solve it. And I think it comes back to the problem solving that you were talking about, right? People go through, there's so much, for example, education and poverty and food hunger. That's something that we really need to solve. It's not about being a startup founder, right? It's not about, and then at that point, because like, for example, you work with Aaron, right? And you enjoy working with Aaron and you're like, I can work with this guy every single day. It's like having that thing, right? It's not about having that life of startup founder. So I guess that's what...
The life of a founder sucks.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like you too. Like, you just started this awesome conversation we're having today. You've been doing a few of these. You just did it.
Yeah.
If someone were to ask you, if to start a podcast, what should they do? What would be the advice that you would give?
Oh man, the tables have turned. I don't know. I think, like you said, just start. Just start. Like, you have to start somewhere. Don't think about you don't have a lot of tools. Just start with some free tools. Learn from people who are actually started doing this. And yeah, I think the best way for me, at least, I learn is by doing things. And over time, you'll figure out how to do things really well. But like you said, right, repetition. Just keep honing in on your skills and then networking. So. Wherever you are, you just keep at it. And I think like the feeling that you got, right, when people started using BAML, right, and they were asking about like, how can I fix this bug? It's the same feeling when I get like when people leave comments or talk about, man, I learned one thing, listening to this episode. I'm like, man, that's what me doing this podcast.
Well, it sounds like you've gotten pretty good at it. I just learned from how you did that.
Yeah, no, I'm still learning, man. But Dude, this has been awesome. Vaibhav, everyone. Thanks a lot for joining the show, man. I've learned so much, and I wish all the best for working in BAML, and I hope you guys do well in the future.
Thanks for having us here, Gaurav. It was really fun.
Yeah, take care. Thanks a lot for joining, everyone.